Bonjour, hi, buenos dias, bom dia. Welcome, bienvenue au Langfest. Welcome to the Langfest. We're really happy to see you there. It's going to be a very nice day, and I hope you're going to enjoy the talks. We're going to kick in with our friend Tobias Dickmeis, if I pronounce it properly. And Tobias is the co-founder of the app Tandem, which helps people to do language exchange. So over the years, they have been gathering data, I guess, and they are going to talk about the pitfalls and also what is really good about language exchange and how to do it properly. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I'm Tobias. Thank you all for joining for the first session of the day. And thank you also to Langfest. Very happy to be here for the first time. A quick question. Who of you is or has been in a regular ongoing language exchange? Yeah, quite a few hands. So there are quite a few experts here in the room as well. So feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions or remarks or adding something to what I'm saying. And before I started talking about language exchange, a few words about me and what I'm doing. So this is me and my team in Berlin, Germany, or a part of my team. We are 16 people from 11 countries, and there's a tiny hint in the picture what we are doing. It's this little logo here, it's Tandem. And Tandem is a language exchange community for mobile phones. So how it works is when you download our app, you will end up in this first screen where you set the languages you're speaking and the ones you want to learn. And then we show you a list of people who learn the languages you're speaking and speak the language you're learning. You can check out their profiles and then get in touch with them and write them messages. And at the core of our app is actually a messenger experience, very much like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, where you can exchange text messages, audio messages, send images. You can also go on audio or video chats. And you have some special language learning features like correcting someone's messages, translating them, or also reading a message out loud that somebody sent you. We have more than 5 million members now around the world using Tandem. Our biggest countries are China, the US, Russia, Brazil, and also the European Union countries combined are big. At the moment, we offer 160 languages you can pick from, including 12 sign languages. And what exactly is a tandem language exchange? So the name of our app actually comes from a language learning method that has been used for decades already, especially around universities in the offline world. And it means learning a language with someone who wants to learn your language by dividing your time into two parts. In one, your partner learns and practices your language and you help them. In the other, you learn and practice their language and your partner helps you. It has been practiced in the offline world for quite some time, and also there have been quite a few scientific studies about it. And what we are basically doing is we're bringing this from the offline world to everybody with a smartphone, and also from mostly university campuses with a big international student body to everybody in the world. What exactly is the benefit of it? So in this kind of universe of different apps where we operate, you have these apps like Duolingo, Babbel, Memrise, Busuu, and a few others that help you build basics, to help you memorize vocabulary and phrases. But if you really want to be fluent, if you really want to speak, we all know that you actually have to speak. And that's where Tandem gets into place. So it helps you to develop real-world speaking skills and listening comprehension. You learn a lot of things that you don't learn on these apps, how people really talk, even in text chat, all these abbreviations people use. You learn swear words and all these things that you don't find in language learning books to actually speak and really become fluent. How much do you actually have to know of your target language to start? So it's actually not much. It's pretty much speak from day one and you learn as you go. But one thing that really helps to have like an efficient language exchange is that you can talk about things that happened in the past. So in most languages that means being able to build a past tense. On a language like Mandarin, just know the words to use, how to talk about things in the past, because that's just what you end up doing a lot. You end up talking a lot about what you did last week or what you did in your last vacation. And this is kind of a nice indicator of when you're ready to actually have an efficient language exchange. Then how to find a partner. So there are lots of options out there, also before apps like ours existed. You can go to language meetups and just try to find someone who wants to talk in a one-on-one situation. In universities and also in language schools, you still find a lot of offers on like bulletin boards. There are also more kind of old school websites that help you find partners. And then of course, there's an app for that. And what to look for in a partner. So what do we see in our data actually constitutes an ongoing successful language exchange? Probably the most important part is that you have matching goals and motivation. If you have a partner who's just kind of brushing up their language to go on a vacation that's in 2 weeks and afterwards they're not really interested anymore, but you are learning a language to live in a new country, then you will have a hard time to be like a good match for a language exchange. And also motivation in terms of how much time do you want to spend into it. You need to be on a somehow similar intensity and time investment. If you just want to spend maybe an afternoon per week and your partner wants to spend 2 or 3 evenings per week to learn with you, then it's not a good match. What we see for successful language exchanges is that they happen 2 to 3 times a week for at least a time frame of 3 to 6 months. These are people who are very happy with the experience in our app and their language exchanges. Also, preferred learning times is important, especially if you learn with someone on the other side of the world. You have to keep time zones in mind. So if you are mostly free in the evening and your language learning partner has time in the morning, that doesn't really work very well. There are ways to work on apps like ours. For example, a lot of people use audio messages. That's kind of asynchronous. You can send an audio message and then receive an answer the next day, and that works very well also across time zones. But we try to push our members into doing audio and especially video chats because that's just most effective for your language learning. Also the learning focus. Are you more into improving your listening and speaking skills? Do you maybe want to work on getting rid of an accent, or are you more into reading and writing? You don't necessarily have to be very aligned on this. You can do the one thing in one language and focus on the other in the other language, but you have to talk about it and be clear about it so your partner knows what your focus is. And then another point is that your target language levels shouldn't differ too much. So if I'm learning Spanish and I'm a beginner and my Spanish exchange partner learns German and is advanced, and then we're going to talk about deep philosophical questions and the meaning of life in Spanish, but we have to kind of talk like toddlers when we, and the other way around, when we speak German, and then in Spanish we have to kind of talk like toddlers, then the language exchange gets a bit imbalanced, and the more interesting conversation happens in the one language, and you also kind of start feeling that you're helping the other person more and you're not really contributing equally. So it's actually important to be on the same or similar levels in your target languages to have a successful language exchange. Then in terms of like demographic data, what we see, the education level seems to be like the biggest factor for a successful language exchange. So if you're on a similar education level, it's kind of the experience we often also make in real life, that we have the best conversations or even our friendships are usually with people who have a similar education level, and we see this reflected in our app as well. The age is also a factor. We see that most of the language exchanges on Tandem, people have an age difference that's less than 5 years. It becomes less important when you get older, but our core members of Tandem are like 18 to 25 years old, and in this age group, it actually seems to be an important factor that you talk to people of a similar age. Then gender is an interesting factor. So 70% of exchanges on Tandem are between male and female, 20% between male-male, and 10% between female-female. And that's very interesting to us, and it's also kind of a constant challenge because there are people downloading our app for users that we didn't create it for, and this kind of gender numbers kind of reflect that. And we all know if we have a language exchange, it helps to have it with someone that we have sympathy for and we generally like. That's a big motivator to come back into the app and practice more. But it's a very slippery slope if this goes in the wrong direction Yeah, so gender is important. It shouldn't be important, maybe, but it seems to be a very important factor for language exchange. And then there's this word chemistry, which we also know from everyday conversations we have with people, and it's the same in language exchange. If you somehow don't click, if you don't have a connection, it's also hard to keep a language exchange up. Then there's the topic of common interests, like do you have a common interest, I don't know, talking about fishing or football or fashion or whatever. That seems to help, but it's a bit overrated from what we see in our data. So it usually often helps, especially to get into a conversation, to have one common interest, but one is already enough, you don't need 3 or 4. And then you start a conversation around this, but then the conversation usually evolves and goes beyond that interest. And so it kind of helps, and it's also on when you create a profile on Tandem, you can write about your interests so other people can read about them, but it's not as important as one might think. Then what to talk about? The next question. So what this method actually provides is authentic casual communication in a natural situation. There is no curriculum. There are like learning materials you find online, and it's one of the things that we think a lot about to, as a next step, implement a material like this into our app as well. But basically what it provides you is an authentic conversation with someone. Just like in everyday life, you would get to know someone and you would talk about your life. It helps a lot to be relaxed and patient about it and give each other time to build trust. Just like in real life as well. So if you kind of force it too much, or if you're like I don't know, that doesn't seem to help so much. It's really about letting the conversation flow. That helps most to actually get into this language exchange and build a conversation. And the topics people usually talk about in the beginning is really work, studies, family, friends, vacations, hobbies, preferences, habits. That's what conversations evolve about, and then you get to know each other and you get more interested in other parts of your life, and you just talk about what's happening and what interests you right now. A very important aspect is also that you find out about each other's culture. We all know that culture and language are also very much intertwined, and you learn language through culture and culture through language. And that's also something that maybe in a language school where a teacher talks about it is very different than you actually getting an experience with someone who talks about their daily life living in a different country. It can also be a very big motivation and a very interesting topic to talk about. A lot of conversations evolve around what's different between cultures. It's also a bit of a challenge because we see also a lot of cultural misunderstandings on our app that are sometimes not so easy to moderate. But it's a very much added benefit of this method to not only learn the language, but learn the language in the context of culture. Then if you want to kind of enhance it or go like more also in a direction to leading your partner towards what you are most interested in, also in your learning focus, you can work with news articles, short stories, song lyrics. You can propose your partner in front of your before your next session to maybe talk about something or explain a song lyrics and then have a conversation around that. You can also get creative. In a video chat, you can give a tour of your place or your city, and you can talk about how certain things are named in your language. You can show what's in your fridge and talk about how the different foods are named. You can go shopping in the shopping center. You can walk the streets. So you can get creative around these things to enhance your language exchange and really get to know language in context of culture a bit more. And then the last one sounds a bit like a relationship advice. It's stay curious about each other, but it's a very important aspect. It's if you kind of your conversation runs dry, then the language exchange is not very efficient. So you kind of have to stay curious about the other person, but also keep them curious about yourself, and yeah, share things that interest each other. Then, in terms of really making progress with your language skills, probably the most important factor in a tandem, in a language exchange, is how to correct each other. And that's tricky. But that's where you actually make progress. Kind of the learning value of a language exchange just being kind of a chat where you get to know another person, or really making progress in your language comes with if they correct you properly and you correct them properly. And the general rule is that mistakes should in general not stay uncorrected, not to become a habit. Or there's a new expression I learned yesterday, not be fossilized. So generally you should correct each other. There are two main risks that come with it, that at a low level there's just so many mistakes made that you feel like really annoying to correct the other person. There's a tiny difference between, or actually big difference between text chat, where it comes much easier to simply correct every single mistake, or being in a conversation where you don't always want to interrupt. And then when you're at a higher level, there's also the risk that you actually understand each other and you have a conversation and you don't want to interrupt it for a mistake. And what's also very important, there are cultural differences between how polite or socially accepted it is to correct other people. And there's very interesting data that we can see in our app about it. So this is our world ranking in terms of countries, in terms of correcting others. So it basically shows how much on average members from these countries correct others. I'm not surprised as a German that we are world champions in correcting others. It's very socially accepted in Germany to do this. It's almost like not correcting someone is you like failure to help someone in need. I'm basically going to correct you with everything, unless, I mean, just some exceptions. If you write me something really sad, like, I don't know, your cat died or something, I'm not going to go, ist gestorben, not hat gestorben or something like this. France is also following up. So basically, if you have a language exchange partner from Germany, France, the US, Spain, you're in a good shape because they're going to correct you. You don't have to push them. But if your exchange partner is from Russia, Japan, China, it's much harder. Actually, the difference is like 10 times. So Germans correct 10 times as much as Chinese, and even Japanese correct 3 times as much as Chinese. So if you're a Chinese language exchange partner, you really have to push them and tell them, hey, please correct me and remind me. To really get that language learning value out of your conversation. And it helps in general also to agree on the intensity you prefer to be corrected. So do I want to be really interrupted, especially in a conversation every single time? Or is it okay for me, for my language exchange partner to take some notes from time to time and then after a while tell me, hey, these are your main mistakes? It actually is advised to not interrupt too frequently in the beginning. Rather pay attention to which mistakes are made and then discuss them afterwards. And also correct indirectly, like your language exchange partner makes a mistake, maybe in your next sentence you use the right form, or you ask a question in the right form, rather than interrupting. There's the native speaker problem that it's often hard to understand the source of a mistake because you're usually not so versed in the grammar of your own language. You don't really see the patterns so much. So you can correct, but you cannot really explain. This is definitely one of the advantages of having a language teacher. You can perfectly explain it to you. And if you correct more like indirectly, then for learners this can be a problem to actually even recognize that you have been correcting them. In general, the rule should be that you should not teach in a language exchange because you're not a teacher, you're a native speaker. You should rather help each other to learn as like a general rule how to support each other. Then, what are the common pitfalls? So, when you're on this language exchange and you're switching languages, it's not a good idea to switch too often. Like the basic rule is that you should speak a language for at least 30 minutes. So a usual language exchange in a video chat or also in real life should at least last an hour. For beginners, that's actually pretty exhausting. And then speak one language 30 minutes and the other 30 minutes. And also when you are in this 30 minutes of speaking one language, really, really try to be disciplined about only speaking that language and resist any temptation to kind of fall back into native language because you're talking about things that are happening in your life and you also want the other person to understand it. It's kind of easy to say, okay, I'm just using a word of my native language, or trying to help them in their native language to get a certain point across. That's very important. Then you should use simple language when you talk in your native language, especially with beginners, but you should avoid all forms of like baby talk. It's also a bit tempting to not be 100% correct anymore about grammar. You should talk like natives talk. That's actually what you're providing to your language exchange partner, and not fall into this kind of language that's it's a bit too easy. Then also not use translations. It's also along the lines of sticking in that one language. But yeah, rather describe things when your language exchange partner doesn't understand them with synonyms, antonyms, associations, body language. And it can be sometimes very tedious and a bit tiring, but this is actually what helps, and this is what helps your partner to memorize things better. Yeah, then one very important thing, probably the most important things, both partners need to contribute equally. If you feel like you're putting more into it than your partner, that might sustain for a while, but it's not sustainable in the long run. Comes back to the question of having matching goals and motivation. But it's really probably the most important factor of keeping a language exchange over the course of a couple of months. And also sounds a bit like relationship advice, but openly discuss problems. It's also sometimes not so easy with cultural differences and sensitivities, but if you feel that things are going in the wrong direction, if you feel you're not getting out of it what you want to, you can always discuss it. It's a language exchange, it's not a relationship, so it's just better than trying to stay in something that you don't really that doesn't really help you, or just end it. At least give it one try to discuss. Hey, I feel like I'm putting more into this, and I sent you the song lyrics to talk about, but you didn't prepare for it. Just really openly discuss the problems that could arise. And that's actually already the end of my talk. So thank you very much. I think we have maybe, yeah.
First, I would like to thank you for this very valuable information, massive amount of information. Thank you very much. All right, so we'll take some questions. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Tamara. So I just had a question about the data that you have when you talked about the corrections and how often people make corrections. My first curiosity was, how did you collect that data? Like, is it through self-reporting? And then my next question, being from the U.S., are you sure the U.S. was above Great Britain? Because I don't know if that was true.
I don't know, the data doesn't lie. So basically this data is based on the correcting text messages. Because correcting someone in a video chat we can't really record, we can't really track this. And it's the average corrections per day, per session from a certain country. But it's based on text message correction.
Hi, I'm Jaya, and language learning is my passion, and so I surround myself with like-minded people, and people use Tandem, and they have gotten into like long-distance relationships. So like, how are you supposed to deal with this kind of situation? Like, do you think it's even possible? Or?
Well, if somebody starts to use Tandem for language learning, and then people get to like each other and have relationships, people also send us wedding invitations and all kinds of things. That's totally fine. I mean, like I said before, it's a big motivation in language exchange that you're learning with someone that you're interested in. The experience that we have to avoid is that you get into the app and you get only people asking you if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and that's what we are working actually pretty hard on. If you download the app and you actually have to fill out a little application form, and if you use certain keywords there, then about 20% of people every day we actually don't let into the community because they clearly don't have a language learning motivation. In the app then itself, you can also report people, and we take this very seriously. But yeah, the case that somebody gets to know each other via our app and then falls in love and is in a relationship, that's totally fine.
Does your app record like per country or whatever? Because they talk about the usage of correcting in text. Does the app track like if a country uses video versus text?
Yeah. Like we can see in which countries video chats are most popular versus text chats. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we have time for another one. Another question? Yeah, you had one. Yeah, sorry.
I was just wondering if you had anything to say about like how long does it take generally? How many times do people try before they find a language partner that they kind of stick with for a while. Do you ever have anything on that?
It's very hard to tell because it depends mostly on your language combinations. So we have, for example, in some languages it's very balanced. English, Spanish, there are roughly the same number of people who want to learn English from and Spanish native speaker and the other way around, but there are other languages like Chinese, for example. We have a lot of Chinese users who want to learn English and not so many English speakers who want to learn Chinese. So if you're an English speaker and you want to learn Chinese, it's actually one of the challenges that we're working on. You probably get flooded with requests, while the other way around, you have to write quite a few requests. But what we see generally in the app, that people write to about 10 to 15 people, and then find an exchange partner amongst these people. I think it's one of the advantages of an app like ours that you can really write to 10 to 15 people in an hour or in 2 hours, while in the real world, it's much harder to meet 10 to 15 people in person and then telling 13 of them, sorry, it doesn't work. I think this is an advantage of an app like ours, and there's a lot of self-selection also taking place where we don't feel we have to put a lot of smart algorithms in there that help you find someone. People actually are smart enough to figure out themselves who's a good exchange partner for them.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome. Thank you.